I'd like you to close your eyes and just draw a picture in your brain of what, if you had a piece of paper in front of you and had to draw God, what would you draw? What would be the elements of it? Okay, just shout out a few things where you think are significant in your drawing. I can't describe a drawing, yes.
I reckon it looks like
A big mountain.
a
Big mountain man, okay. Long hair, okay. You see God in other people, okay. A father with arms open. Any other? Lightning and flashing and loud noises. Yeah, we do this exercise, I won't be able to do it again now, when we first do foundation course. And we ask them the first thing, people to draw what God is like. And we kind of get these people, and I did it myself, we draw some images which are kind of usually a bit abstract. They're symbolic of what we think God is like. That one we can't see very well in this light, but this is one I got Copilot to draw. AI drew this one. As to, even at my age, I could still use AI. But so expressing the love of God and the light of God, something of the fire and the power of God. I actually think it did quite well, really, in who it was. However, the Bible gives us a different description of what God looks like. And it's not that picture, because we don't know what Jesus looks like. But the Bible tells us that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Jesus himself said, "You have seen if you've seen me, you have seen the Father." And the fullness of God dwells in him. Colossians also tells us that the fullness of God dwells in Jesus. Jesus himself is the tangible, physical representation of who God is. And why it's important is he was also fully man. So he was fully God, and all that goes with that and the significance of that, but he's also fully man. We do not have a high priest who's unable to identify with our weaknesses, but we have one who was tempted in every way without sin. So Jesus himself is a representation of God, is God, that we can actually identify with, but also he can identify with us. And that, I think, is the significant thing that we need to embrace, is that Jesus was fully God and Jesus was fully man. And I think it's very easy for us sometimes to lose that image. I don't want to say we relegate Jesus to the man that died and rose again, because it's the most significant thing that ever happened in history. But I think it's often we kind of look at, I was just thinking myself, when I'm praying, how do I relate to God? What do I see? And the sense of, we see that Jesus has done his bit. His bit is to bring us to the Father. He opens the way, and he's done that, and now we have access to the Father. And that is all totally true. But actually, he ain't finished yet. He's still at work. Even as we were just praying this morning, as Jamie was sharing, he's still at work, and he's still at work in our lives. More of that in a minute. Two verses struck me in Mark. One was Mark 8, where Jesus sighs. When he heard this, he sighed deeply in his spirit. Why do these people keep demanding miraculous sign? I'll tell you the truth. I will not give this generation any sign. And Mark 7:33-34, Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. He put his fingers into the man's ears. Then spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, Ephatha, which means be opened. And I thought, why was Jesus sighing? I think he was sighing because these guys just didn't get it. And he wasn't out of frustration. It was out of sadness and desperation. There was something more they were not seeing. Pharisees couldn't see it at all. They just wanted miracles. They wanted to do things for him. But this other guy too, this mute guy, who also Jesus took him on one side, and he went after he'd healed him. He said, "Don't tell anybody. Don't let anybody know." And I think sometimes we can come to Jesus with the expectation of what we can get from him, but actually, there's so much more. There's so much more that he is, and he wants to be to us, and he is to us now, than just this person that just does things for us. In that sense, there's something more in his transformation power, his ability to make us more like him, and to cause us to become more holy and live in the way that he wants us to live. So, how does seeing Jesus fully and embracing fully who he is make a difference? Jamie referred to this last week. Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2 says, "Let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith." Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith, and there's two kind of schools of thought on this. Some people teach that, well, he authored faith, he started faith, and he perfected faith. It's all done, and it's finished. Others read it, which is the way I want to interpret this morning, is that he's started the work in us, and he's perfecting the work in us. There's a very personal sense in which Jesus is working in our lives for each one of us. It's not just, it's our race. We are running a race, and he's working at that in us. He's starting it off, and he started it off, and he's working it through, and he's finishing it in us. And why can he do that? Because in him lie all hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Don't you want to press in and find out more about these hidden treasures and this hidden wisdom? This is Jesus active now on earth in our lives, not something that was just been done. He's not just dead in heaven, but somebody who's not dead in heaven, he's alive in heaven, but who's actually here now working in us individually. And Colossians goes on to say, "And now just as you've accepted Christ Jesus as your Lord, you must continue to follow him. Let your roots grow down into him. Let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will go strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness." So as we deepen our relationship with him, as we recognize that Jesus is alive now, as we press into him, then he will transform us and change us. And I like this thing about, "and you will overflow with thankfulness." Do you know, we can't underestimate the power of thankfulness. Sue and I have recently done a kind of a healthy eating program, and it backs up with lots of bits of advice. And one of their key foundational points, this isn't a Christian thing at all, is give thanks for three things every day. Being thankful. Even the world recognizes the significance of that. And it comes again and again. And it just changes our outlook, changes who we are, changes our perspective on the way that our lives are lived and where we are. So, how else will we recognize? Well, we go back to the first thing. It says that let us run with endurance. If we're looking to Jesus, the thing that it will bring into our lives is endurance. Jamie mentioned this last week as well, funny enough. We need to be pressing in. It's not, and endurance is not something which is optional. It's not something which is an add-on, or maybe I can avoid it. You're not going to avoid it, okay? Because we're at war. And we are at war against spiritual forces. The Bible talks about spiritual forces, and we're not just fighting flesh, but it's against spiritual forces, and I've lost the verse now, it'll come. But actually the war is also very much in ourselves. And it says, "Dear friends, I warn you as temporary residents and foreigners to keep away from worldly desires." Some versions say fleshly lusts that wage war against our very souls. So put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you. Do you know we're corrupt? We're really, really corrupt. Jesus knew we were corrupt. It says back in Luke that he wouldn't actually even trust himself to man because he knew what was in the heart of man. And it doesn't matter how much we try not to be corrupt, there's something in us that's fighting against us. I went to the physio few weeks ago. Well, it's a couple of months ago now. And I had a problem with my back. And he said, do you know what causes that? He says, it's because you keep crossing your legs. He says, you don't cross your legs like that, do you? I said, no. I thought, why did I say that? Why did I say no? Because I do cross my legs. I do it all the time. and I went around and I thought, why did I do that? I thought, I just lied. You know, I didn't tell the truth. What caused me to do that? And there's just something inside of me that defaulted. And I went back to him after the next time I saw him and said, you know, when I said that to you, you know, I wasn't telling the truth. He says, I know you weren't, he said. But there's just something in it. It's a war. It's a battle that we constantly have against something inside of us which defaults against what God wants. So what's the alternative to this stuff that lurks inside us? Jesus says you should clothe yourself with tender-hearted mercy. So I've just turned over 2 pages. Kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. That's easy, isn't it? Isn't that easy? Okay? Being patient, being gentle. You ask my wife, she knows how easy I find that. Making allowance for everyone's faults. You know, don't make allowance. Yeah? Forgive anyone who offends you. Anyone, forgive them. Above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. Can you see why we need to look to Jesus as the author and perfecter of our faith? He's there. He's done it. He's walked it himself. And it's not therefore a thing that he's putting on us. He's saying, I've walked this way. Come and walk this way with me. That's why we need him. He's real. He's living now in our lives. We need that revelation of how he's there for us at this point to empower us to become the people that he wants us to be. Why do we need endurance? I love these verses. I hadn't really looked at them before, but I just came on these verses and I thought, wow. So Hebrews 10:36. Patient endurance is what you need now, so that you will continue to do God's will. If you want to do God's will, we're going to have to endure. We're going to be in situations, and we can't do it on our own. We need him. Then you will receive all that he has promised. So there is a reward. Jesus received all that was promised because he endured the cross and despised the shame. As we endure the situations that we find ourselves facing, and when you're part of a church which is close relationship, you're going to have to learn how to be gentle and patient and loving and caring. When we endure, we will receive all we've promised. The next verse is Romans 5, verse 4. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. If we want to be changed, if we want a God-like character, we're going to have to learn to endure. We can't endure on our own. It's too much. Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, has shown us how. He's led the way. If we follow him, and he will empower us and enable us to endure. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. So endurance brings completion. So we have to learn to endure. We can't just do things and opt out when it gets difficult. That's not the way it's meant to be. Jesus is there to enable us to press on in and push into the situations he wants to do. I thought I couldn't actually move on without telling you some stories about where I've had to learn to endure. There's lots of things I couldn't tell you. Some are quite personal and difficult. Others, so I found 3 stories which I felt were probably a bit safe. First one was, I lived in Tottenham many years ago. It's a long while ago, that's why it's safe. And I was teaching at the time, and I just started teaching, not been teaching all that long, and I would get home from work, and on a Friday, end of the week, and then there was teens in the evening. Now the teens was in Dagenham, and I lived in Tottenham, and so I used to have to drive around 6:30 in the evening, in my car, go and drive around and pick them all up, and take them over to Dagenham, Heathway it was, down that way. We'd run the session, then I'd drive back, then I'd to drop them all back in the evening. And they weren't the easiest bunch. They were all leaders' children, actually. And actually, they were so very difficult. To say how difficult they were, driving back one night, I actually threw one out the car, and when I was on Whalebone Lane, and I drove on a little bit just to see what happened, but I did go back for him. But they were causing a bit of trouble in Dagenham with the other teenagers. These were good church kids, these other ones, and they were causing some trouble. But because this was my Tottenham bunch of teens, I loved them, I looked out for them, I cared about them, and I would defend them and protect them, and I'd do what I felt was good. I also used to meet with them. So anyway, a meeting got called, and I went to this meeting ready to discuss the teens, and I got so hauled out of the coals because of the way these teenagers were behaving when we were in Dagenham in the group. I absolutely hauled out of the coals. Somehow it was all my fault. I was doing my best. I really thought I was doing what God wanted me to do. My heart, I thought, was right. And I came out of that meeting feeling about that big. And I thought, what do I do with this? So I still really felt that God had called me to serve amongst young people. And I remember that John phoned me several weeks after, wanting me to know how I wanted to serve. I think he decided, you don't want to do that anymore, do you? And I said to him, I want to help out with the youth. I still want to work in the youth. And I still remember him saying to me, I didn't think you'd want to do that anymore. But it was just something God had put in my heart to push on through, even in spite of what we'd call friendly fire. It was unexpected. It had come from a source I wasn't expecting. It was in the church. And 5 years later, I moved over here, and John said to me, I'd like you to help Sue Little, as she was then, with the youth, and the rest is history. It might never have happened. And I kind of feel that often we can find ourselves in situations which close us in from the closest possible situation, and we're trying to do our best. But we need to get hold of who God is saying and who God is, and we need to be enduring. Look to Jesus. What's he given us to do? And we push on through. And that heart's not changed. We still have young people around our house now. Because it's something that God put in me, and we've pushed through with that. Yeah. The other example, also Tottenham, I used to live in Barnet. Barnet's a nice place, very green. And I was living with my parents, though. I was in my 20s. And I just felt I was driving down to Tottenham to the church, because church is focused in Tottenham, and didn't it wasn't working in terms of my engagement. You kind of drive away back to Barnet. And I felt I needed to move to Tottenham. I felt this was where I needed to be involved. There was only one house available for blokes. It was an infamous house. And it wasn't quite a squat, but it was a couple of levels above. But it was not well kept clean. It wasn't very clean. It was filthy, actually. There was one of these, in the kitchen, there was a white and black floor, but it was mostly black. And some examples of what this was like. This guy was a lovely guy. He just didn't organise his house very well. So I was pleased to live there, but I had to pay rent to live there. And there was a bag in the lounge in the front room, and it'd been there 3 months. I knew it was his washing. So I said to him, sorry, it's my hand. I said to him, don't you think you've got to put that laundry away? He said, well, I probably need to take it to the laundry first, he said. Second example of what the house was like was we got burgled. And the police came in, they looked at the lounge, and they said, I don't want to be rude, he says, but he said, did the burglars do this, or is the house all like this? And it was always like that. And I think the third example of what it was like living there was you had a GP, in the days when GPs used to come and visit you, and he was ill in bed, and the GP went into his bedroom, and he looked in his bedroom, and he looked around, and he said, well, where's the patient? Because he couldn't even see him in his bed. So this was not, I'd moved from the luxury of living with my parents paying virtually no rent to a place where I had to pay rent in a place which was not so nice. Let's put it that way. However, it was right in the middle of things. And the opportunities to build relationships, hang out with other young people my age, share life together, have people around. We used to have teenagers come around to the house even in those days. We had even some street kids in at one point. I think they're the ones that actually burgled us. But the whole actual lifestyle was a step back, and there was an endurance in that place. It wasn't lovely living there, but for the benefits of what I was gaining for being in that place, there was that readiness to endure and that readiness to live in that situation. God's given me a nice house now, and a nice person to share it with. The last story of endurance I'll tell you was, this is much more recent. I used to do some mentoring, tutoring, A-level chemistry tutoring, and I got asked if I would go and run some classes with about 20 students with Queen Mary University. I mean, this is quite, here I was, the end of my career, already retired, and I was being asked to teach in Queen Mary University. It's actually in Bart's Dental School even. And they gave me passes to get right around the whole of Royal London Hospital, which was a bit weird. Anyway, so I went and I started teaching this group. They were group from overseas. They were mostly UAE students, lots and lots of money. And most of them, and they'd been sent over here to do medical school, foundation course for medical school. And if they passed it, they could go on and be trained to be doctors. So I started mentoring these kids. And after the first term, they did a review. They do an evaluation of your teaching. And these kids rubbished me. Absolutely rubbished me. Told me I was useless. I thought, blinking cheek, I've been teaching science 33 years, and now I'm being told by these 17-year-old, 18-year-old upstarts that I'm no good, that I'm useless. And basically, they were just not, they were expecting me to stand in the class and just talk at them, and that wasn't the style of teaching that I was used to, and was trying to make them do a bit of work. I didn't like it. And I thought, well, I've got no obligation to be here. I have no, I don't need to be working here. And I've retired, for goodness sake. And so I was ready to just chuck the towel in. So, well, I'm not doing this anymore. But I just felt a real nudge from God that, no, you've committed to doing this. You need to do this. So I stuck at it. I actually went and I prepared my lessons as if every one of that students in that class were waiting for every word I had to say. And I just pushed through with that because I felt that it was about not what they were thinking or not what I was doing for them. It's what God was putting in my heart to do and had given me to do. At the end, 20% of them passed, 80% of them failed, but they wanted to give me the job full time because they'd seen something in me. I didn't take it I didn't want to give up that much time, but I was retired, for goodness sake. But what I'm saying is that when you endure and when you push on in, and again, it wasn't under my strength. I couldn't have done that in my own strength. It's a thing of looking to God, and God gives us that capacity to do the things that he wants us to do. And I just felt this morning that it was important that there were people here that will hear these stories. I know they're a bit long and a bit about me, but there were situations that people are facing where, the temptation is just to throw in the towel or be frustrated And Jesus wants to say, look, I've walked this way already, and I'm walking this with you. And if you walk this with me, then we're going to walk through this, and you're going to receive all that I've promised. All that I've promised. So, we all have an individual race, and it's not winning that matters, it's finishing. Let's run with endurance the race that God has set before us. It's all about Jesus. Colossians 2:2, I want them to have complete confidence that they understand the mysterious plan, which is Christ himself. Jesus is the plan. He is the plan that God has given to us. It isn't a plan that's just personal for me. He is the plan. And when I connect with him, and when I'm following him, I become part of that plan. And that God's plan must be fulfilled in my life. It must be fulfilled in my life. He's the author and perfecter of my faith. If I try and work this out by myself, then I'm going to get into myself in all kinds of trouble. But if I look to him, he will enable me to become and be the person and fulfill the plan that he has for my life, because he is the plan. God is revealed through Jesus. Jesus is revealed through us as we see him as the author and perfecter of our faith. A little side story that just struck me when I was preparing this. I was thinking about Jesus and Judas. Remember, Judas betrayed Jesus. And Jesus said, I'm a person who is, and 2 verses. When Jesus, in John 13, Jesus was washing the disciples' feet. And Jesus actually knew that Judas was going to betray him. But he still washed Judas's feet. And what he said was that to Peter, if I can't wash your feet, you can't be part of me. It also later on said that Jesus was deeply troubled. So he felt the emotion of the betrayal of Judas. He knew what it was like. And I just felt that, how did he handle it? How did Jesus handle the fact that he knew that Jesus was going to betray him, but he still let him in that close? And I just felt God wanted to say to some of us this morning that because of things that have happened where we've been betrayed in the past by people, there's a tendency just to push people back and not let people in so close, because it's happened to me in the past, and there's a resistance to letting them in. And Jesus had to deal with that himself. But he dealt with it knowing he was going to be betrayed. We don't know if we're going to be betrayed by the people that are with us. We don't know if they're going to disappoint us. And I think there's a sense in which there needs to be a readiness. He wants to help you, if you're in that situation, just to open up your life and to take down that barrier and to allow that person in close, and let them in closer to you, trusting that Jesus will be the author and perfecter of your faith. The other application to this I want to mention was the LifeLine legacy. We have a legacy. I'm part of that legacy almost. I've been around quite a few years. And we teach these values: love, acceptance, forgiveness, serving, generosity, and integrity. But it's easy to see them as traditions of the church. I need to do this because I need to maintain the traditions of the church. This is the legacy. This is where we've come from. Okay, this is what I need to carry. But actually, they don't come from the people, or from John, or from the church, or from the elder people in the church. They come directly from him. He's the author and perfecter of our serving. He's the author and perfecter of our integrity. He's the one that sacrificed his life for us, and he's the author and perfecter of our love. He's the man who forgave and all those who destroyed his life. He's the author and perfecter of our forgiveness. And he's the one that gave himself, though he was good, though he was God. He is the author and perfecter. Even though he was God, he gave himself, and the author and perfecter of our generosity. That these things, just take it back to them. It's gone, missed them. What happened there? Help. Thank you. Not there yet. Okay, if we go back to these things, they're not there because they were our lifeline tradition. They're because they're from Jesus himself. And I've just felt there's a sense where we can enter into these afresh. That Jesus, as we see who Jesus is, author and perfecter of our faith, he wants to make these things alive to us afresh. That we can ask him to help him with those things and we can step into them, not because they're part of the legacy, but because of they come directly from him. There was a story about if we look at the legacy, well, no, it's about looking at the witnesses. Okay, in Hebrews where it talks about there's a cloud of witnesses, and there was a story about a boy who was ploughing a field, and he ploughed this field and it went wonky, crooked. And the farmer said to him, you know what you need to do? You need to focus something on the distance. So he did the next one, and it was still wonky. So the farmer said, well, what did you focus on? He said, it was that brown cow over there, he said. And what we need to focus on, we focus on the legacy. If we focus on what's gone behind, we're not going to get it straight. We're going to get it crooked. But if we want to get it straight, we need to focus on Jesus. Jesus is the one that teaches me to serve, teaches me to be generous, teaches me to forgive, teaches me to walk in integrity, and enables me to accept other people. So we've just been through that. So how do we look to Jesus? So it says in John 15, but when Jesus said himself, but when the Helper comes, whom I shall send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Spirit, he will testify of me. So the one that testifies to who Jesus is to us is the Holy Spirit. So we just need to ask for the Holy Spirit to reveal to us afresh who Jesus is. And that's how we access him as author and perfecter of our faith, through the Holy Spirit's revelation. We have to ask him to do that. My response, what situations are you facing where you need to fix your eyes on Jesus for grace and faith to endure? Is there a disappointment you're still carrying, a betrayal that you need Jesus to lead you out from? And where do you need to fix your eyes on Jesus more to become effective in expressing the heart of Jesus to others?